The Horror Zoo. The night was colder than usual, the kind that makes your breath fog up in front of you. The small town of Blackwood had been buzzing with rumors for months about the reopening of the old zoo at the edge of town. Abandoned for over 2 decades, Blackwood Zoo had been a popular attraction before it abruptly closed after the mysterious disappearance of its staff and animals. Ethan, a local journalist, couldn't resist the lure of a good story. He decided to visit the zoo before its official reopening, hoping to uncover the truth behind its dark history. Equipped with a flashlight, a camera, and his trusty notebook, Ethan slipped through the broken gate late one evening. As he ventured inside, the air grew heavy, carrying the faint stench of decay. Overgrown vines snaked around rusting cages, and the once vivid murals of happy animals on the walls had faded into ghostly outlines. His flashlight flickered as he entered the main enclosure area. The first eerie sign was the silence. Not even the chirp of a cricket broke the oppressive quiet. Ethan paused by an old lion's cage, its bars bent outward as if something immense had forced its way out. A plaque read, "Simba, the King of Blackwood Zoo." But the cage was empty, save for deep claw marks on the concrete floor. Suddenly a low growl rumbled through the darkness. Spinning around, Ethan pointed his flashlight toward the sound, only to see glowing yellow eyes staring back at him from the shadows. The figure moved, revealing a skeletal lion, its translucent skin stretched over exposed bones. Its growl seemed to echo, not just in the air, but inside Ethan's very chest. Ethan took slow, trembling steps backward, careful not to provoke the skeletal beast. His flashlight's beam danced across the broken enclosures, revealing more signs of destruction, massive footprints, claw marks, and something that looked disturbingly like dried blood. He muttered to himself, "What the hell happened here?" He ducked into a nearby building labeled Primate House, hoping to hide and gather his thoughts. Inside, the air was damp and reeked of rot. Rows of empty cages lined the walls, their bars twisted and broken. Ethan spotted a journal lying on a desk, covered in dust and cobwebs. Flipping through it, he found entries written by a zookeeper named Margaret. The last few pages described strange occurrences: animals behaving erratically, shadowy figures lurking at night, and whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. One entry stood out. "Mr. Blackwood has been spending nights in the Central Plaza. I heard chanting, I think he's summoning something. This zoo isn't safe anymore." Ethan's pulse quickened as he realized the darkness surrounding the zoo wasn't just neglect, it was deliberate. A sudden noise snapped him out of his thoughts. A rhythmic tapping echoed through the building. Turning slowly, he saw a chimpanzee standing on 2 legs at the far end of the corridor. But this was no ordinary primate. Its face was half-decayed, with glowing red eyes, and its movements were jerky and unnatural. The chimp let out a bone-chilling screech, and the other cages in the room began to rattle violently. Ethan bolted, narrowly dodging skeletal hands that clawed at him from broken enclosures. He burst out of the primate house and didn't stop running until he was sure the undead animals weren't following him. He found himself in the aquarium building. The glass tanks were shattered, and the floor was wet with stagnant, foul-smelling water. As he walked cautiously through the dim hall, he noticed strange shapes moving in the shadows. One tank still held water, and inside floated a massive octopus, its eyes glowing with a sickly green light. Ethan froze as the creature extended a long, translucent tentacle, pressing it against the cracked glass as if testing its strength. The water suddenly churned, and Ethan realized the creature wasn't alone. Smaller eel-like beings swirled around it, their sharp teeth visible through their ghostly forms. The octopus let out a guttural moan that sounded almost human. Ethan didn't stick around to see what would happen next. Stumbling out into the open air, Ethan tried to steady his breathing. His mind raced, piecing together what little he'd learned. Margaret's journal hinted that Victor Blackwood had been involved in occult practices. Could it be that the animals were victims of some dark ritual? His flashlight flickered again, and he banged it against his palm, cursing under his breath. That's when he heard it. A soft, melodic tune, like a music box playing somewhere in the distance. Against his better judgment, Ethan followed the sound, his curiosity overpowering his fear. The music led him to a carousel in the children's play area. The once bright paint was now chipped and faded, and the wooden animals were cracked and worn. But the carousel was spinning slowly, creaking with every rotation. Ethan approached cautiously, and as he got closer, the music stopped abruptly. Suddenly, the wooden animals on the carousel began to move, their lifeless eyes snapping open. A lion roared, a zebra bucked, and an elephant raised its trunk. Ethan stumbled back in horror as the creatures broke free from their mounts, their wooden bodies cracking and splintering as they advanced toward him. He ran blindly through the zoo, the sound of clattering hooves and scraping claws behind him. He thought he saw a gate in the distance, a way out, but his foot caught on a root, and he fell hard to the ground. The wooden creatures were almost upon him when an eerie howl pierced the air, stopping them in their tracks. Ethan looked up to see the skeletal lion from before standing on a nearby hill. Its glowing eyes locked onto him, and with a growl, the wooden animals retreated. But Ethan knew this wasn't a rescue. The lion was just claiming its prey. Desperate, he found himself in the zoo's central plaza. In the moonlight, a statue of the zoo's founder, a man named Victor Blackwood, stood tall. Ethan's gaze fell on the plaque at its base, which read, "In memory of the sacrifices made to bring this zoo to life." Sacrifices. The word sent chills down his spine. As Ethan leaned closer to inspect the plaque, the ground beneath him began to tremble. He barely had time to react, as the statue's eyes glowed red, and the figure seemed to come alive. Its stone face twisted into a sinister grin. A deep voice echoed in the air, "You shouldn't have come here." Ethan screamed, turning to run, but he was surrounded. The skeletal lion emerged from the shadows, the giant snake coiled around the plaza, and the ghostly birds swooped low, circling him. It was then that he understood the truth. The zoo wasn't just abandoned, it was cursed. The animals weren't just undead, they were trapped souls, victims of the founder's dark rituals to gain power and wealth. Ethan's intrusion had awakened them, and now they wanted revenge. The flashlight fell from his hand as the creatures closed in. His screams echoed through the night, but in Blackwood, no one came to the zoo after dark. The next morning, the townsfolk noticed the gate of the zoo wide open, but no sign of Ethan was ever found. The only thing left behind was his notebook, its last page scrawled with trembling handwriting. "The zoo is alive. Stay away." The end.